Week 7 of the fantasy football season, and here's quarterback starts, hits every matchup this week. So 6 teams on bye, a little lighter of a schedule and a lot of injuries as well. But anyway, the first matchup Thursday Night Football, the Jacksonville Jaguars at the New Orleans Saints. So Trevor Lawrence, he's banged up with a knee injury. Time of recording this, we don't know for sure if he's going to play in this game. So far, day to day, the reports have come out. But if he plays in this game or not, Trevor Lawrence isn't really a quarterback I'm interested in, because we know Thursday night they are the shootout type of games usually, but Lawrence, he hasn't reached past 20 fantasy points since week 1. So this week here with a tough matchup and not 100% if he plays in this one, he's a sit. And CJ Beathard is the starter, he's a sit as well. Now to the Saints, borderline option Derek Carr. Derek Carr is still getting acclimated to his new team and the new offense, but they do have good weapons. Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, who's been healthy so far this season. Rashid Shaheed is a deep ball threat, and Kamara out of the backfield. But anyway, Derek Carr, even in this matchup, is a borderline option because this Jacksonville defense has been pretty solid for the most part this season. Now to the Falcons at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Desmond Ridder, one of the worst starting quarterbacks in the league, in my opinion. I know he's been putting up some fantasy numbers the last few weeks with 20 or more fantasy points the last 2 weeks, but he's not a quarterback you could trust. I know deeper leagues, 2 quarterback leagues with all these buys, teams have no choice but to put in Desmond Ridder possibly. But this week he's a sit. Baker Mayfield a sit for me as well. Baker, he's been decent so far this season. 3 games with 20 or more fantasy points as well for him. But this Atlanta Falcon defense, surprisingly one of the better units in the league versus quarterbacks this season, giving up the 5th least amount of fantasy points. So Baker is a sit. Now to the Raiders at the Chicago Bears. You're not going to want any part of this. Jimmy Garoppolo most likely out in this game here. And Brian Hoyer or Aiden O'Donnell are going to get the call. We saw Aiden O'Donnell start early in the season, and we saw Hoyer last week coming in for Garoppolo. But either way, in a decent matchup versus a pretty bad Chicago Bear defense, I can't trust any of these quarterbacks, and they're both sits for me. Now to the Bears, Justin Fields most likely out a few weeks with the thumb injury here. He sprained it pretty bad. And Tyson Bagent, he came in last week and he didn't look good at all for the Chicago Bear team. So this Raider team, I like their DST this week, definitely as one of the top starts in the league. So right now, Tyson Bagent, I don't see him doing much in this game. He's a sit for me. Now to the Cleveland Browns at the Indianapolis Colts. PJ Walker, somehow they pulled it out and beat the San Francisco 49ers. It's obviously was more of a defensive effort winning that game, but PJ Walker really wasn't getting the football down the field. He's not going to be putting up numbers, and who knows if he's going to play. But if PJ Walker plays, he's a sit for me. And Deshaun Watson, he's going to be a sit for me as well. This season, we really didn't see much out of Watson, and he's obviously not 100%, even if he does return in this ballgame with the shoulder injury. So he's a sit. And Gardner Minshew, a sit as well. This Cleveland Brown defense, they've been a solid unit this season, holding teams down to the mid-teens, low 20s all season long. And Gardner Minshew, I know he's not that horrible of a quarterback, but he's not really a quarterback you're going to have confidence in and put up fantasy points, even in a matchup where this Indianapolis Colts team is at home this week. Washington Commanders at the New York Giants. So Sam Howell, he's been a top 10 quarterback in fantasy points so far this season. And this week here in a matchup with the Giants, I have a young secondary and give up a lot of fantasy points in a potential shootout between these NFC East rivals. I have him as a starter. I know Josh Allen didn't have a great game last week, but I think that was more Dable knowing Allen's tendencies, being the offensive coordinator for many seasons over there in Buffalo. And now to the Giants, Daniel Jones, he's been a train wreck this season, really taking a step back after signing a huge deal in the offseason. And I know this Commander defense isn't that good. We just saw Ridder go over 300 yards versus them. But I can't trust Daniel Jones. And this Giant offensive line's banged up in one of the worst lines in the league. Tyrod Taylor possibly could start in this one again. And to be honest, Tyrod Taylor, he looked better than Daniel Jones has this season, making some plays, throwing that deep ball at the Buffalo Bills, and finding some time behind the offensive line. But in a game like this, he's not a quarterback I would have confidence as well, so he's a sit. Now to the Lions at the Baltimore Ravens. Jared Goff, he's been a solid quarterback this season. All his weapons are back at the receiving position. Obviously, St. Brown back, had a big 100-yard-plus game. Jameson Williams, he's been back the last 2 weeks. He caught a nice deep ball for a touchdown. And Josh Reynolds, a nice slot guy, and Laporta, one of the better tight ends in the league. So this week here, I think they're going to try to spread out this Baltimore defense. David Montgomery most likely out. We'll see if Gibbs plays and is the running back. But Jared Goff, he's been a top 10, top 12 quarterback all season. He's a start. Lamar Jackson's a start once again. I know Jackson, he's had a couple monster games and a couple games he didn't do much, but this could be a potential shootout as well with the Lions and the Ravens. So Lamar, you're going to put him in your starting lineup each and every week, unless obviously you got a guy like a Jalen Hurts or Josh Allen and Mahomes, where pretty much he's always going to be in that top 5 to 7 range at the quarterback position. Now to the Bills, at the Patriots, Josh Allen, he's a start each and every week. I know last week wasn't a good game for him versus a pretty poor Giant defense, but it was a one-off game, and Allen still leads the league in fantasy points at the quarterback position, so he's a must-start, matchup proof. And now to the Patriots, Mac Jones, we'll see if he's going to start in this game or they go to Will Grier, where reports suggested last week if Jones continues to struggle, they're going to go to Will Grier. But anyway, you don't want any part of these quarterbacks over there in New England versus a tough defense, even though we know they got a lot of injuries. Milano out for the season, Darius White out for the season, Von Miller still not 100%. But this Buffalo team, I think they go into New England and have a big game, and no one's going to do much for them. Now to the Cardinals, at the Seattle Seahawks, Joshua Dobbs. First 3-4 games of the season, he got off to a great start, but the last 2 weeks we really haven't seen much. And obviously there's more tape on Joshua Dobbs where teams are studying and they're picking up on his tendencies. So Joshua Dobbs, he definitely has to adjust things right now and try to get things going back again. But this week here, 12th man in Seattle, going to be a tough game, going to be loud crowd noise, obviously one of the loudest stadiums, if not the loudest in the league here. And I know he's got decent weapons still on the outside. Hollywood Brown, Zach Ertz, middle of the field, Michael Wilson, Rondale Moore. But without James Conner back there, true running back, where they're going by committee right now, I think that's going to hurt a little bit. And he's a sit. Geno Smith, the borderline option. Geno last season took the league by storm finally, after many seasons sitting on the bench and bouncing around the league, after he was a bust pick with the New York Jets. But like I said, Geno Smith, the numbers haven't been there. One big performance this season, over 25 fantasy points, and his output would be 10-15 points the last few weeks. So this week, even in a good matchup on paper, where I think this could be a big run game for the Seattle offense with Kenneth Walker, Geno's borderline for me. Now to the Steelers, at the Los Angeles Rams, Kenny Pickett, he's been up and down so far the first 2 seasons of his NFL career. Deontay Johnson most likely coming back, which is always a plus, one of the better possession receivers in the league. But Kenny Pickett versus a Ram defense starting to hit their stride right now. He's not a quarterback I could trust, and he's not 100% as well with the knee, even though he did tough it out in Week 5's game as Pickett in the come-from-behind victory at Baltimore and played. But even with the bye week, I don't think he's 100%. He's a safe. Matthew Stafford to start. A lot of great weapons on this offense. Cooper Kupp, obviously Puka Nacua having a great rookie season, even though he came off a bad game last week. Kyren Williams obviously might not play in this game, but a lot of weapons. And I think in this one, they're going to spread out this Steelers team, because the Steelers do give up the 6th most fantasy points to quarterbacks on the season. So Stafford's a start. Now to the Chargers. At the Chiefs, this is going to be a high-scoring game, AFC West opponent. So Justin Herbert, I know it wasn't a great game versus a pretty stout Dallas Cowboy defense, but he still had over 20 fantasy points this week here. This is going to be a shootout, and this is a game the Chargers need, because right now they're falling down the standings. Yeah, but Justin Herbert, he did miss a few key throws versus the Dallas Cowboys in Week 6. One up the sidelines where Keenan Allen was wide open, and he just missed him. It possibly would have been a big 70-plus yard touchdown. But anyway, this week here versus Kansas City, a team he's had a decent career versus, and he sees obviously twice a year. I got him as a start. Patrick Mahomes, he's a start each and every week. I know he hasn't had those elite ball games, 35, 40 fantasy points, but weekly he's putting that 25 up about as Patrick Mahomes. So this week here versus one of the worst defenses in the league, they give up the 4th most fantasy points to quarterbacks on the season. Mahomes obviously is a start. Now to the Packers. At the Denver Broncos, Jordan Love, he got off to a hot start the first 3 weeks of the season, but the last 2 weeks, 4 and 5, he didn't do much versus the Lions and the Vegas Raiders. And this week here, I know this Denver Bronco defense isn't that good, but the Broncos are home. Jordan Love, it's pretty much like he's a rookie, obviously. It's his first year as a starter, even though he's been sitting on the bench for multiple seasons behind Aaron Rodgers. But anyway, this week, he's a borderline option for me as Jordan Love. It wouldn't be surprising to me if he gets 30 fantasy points or he gets 15 fantasy points. So this week here, it's a little 50-50. So I got him as a borderline. Now to Russell Wilson. Last week was the worst game of the season in terms of fantasy points for Russell Wilson, where other weeks it's been 18 or more fantasy points. So this week here versus a young Green Bay Packer defense and this Denver Bronco team, they got to get off the schneid somehow here. I know they're 1-5 on the season, but Russell Wilson, he's going out there. He's trying his best. Obviously, his best seasons are behind them, but in terms of fantasy football, like I mentioned, he's still up there, top 10 in fantasy points. So right now, Russ, I have as a start and bounce back at home this week. Now, Sunday Night Football, what a matchup. And what a high-scoring ball game this is going to be, I believe, with the Miami Dolphins at the Philadelphia Eagles. So both these quarterbacks, top 5 options each and every week. Tua is a start. Him and Tyreek Hill playing on another level right now. Jalen Waddle starting to get things going. And Raheem Mostert doing it all out of the backfield. So Tua is a start each and every week and an MVP candidate. And Jalen Hurts, he's a start each and every week. I know he came off a horrible game with 3 interceptions at the New York Jets, but I think it was a little bit fluky. And that Eagle team, they just put in a stinker in that one. So right now, Sunday Night Football, huge ball game. Right now, this Eagle team only 1 game up in the division here, so this is a big game for them. And I think Hurts bounces back. Him and A.J. Brown on the same page. They've been going off over the last few weeks, and Dallas Goedert the last 2 weeks is getting back into this offense and playing well, so he's a start. And now, final game of the week, San Francisco 49ers at the Vikings, Monday Night Football. So Brock Purdy, horrible ball game, no doubt about it. He might be down Deebo Samuel and Christian McCaffrey in this one. We got to see what the report is in the final word with their injuries. But Brock Purdy, I think, gets back on track. Minnesota, one of the worst defenses in the league against the pass. And it's an indoor game as well, which always helps because the conditions in Cleveland weren't all that great in last week's game. But right now, indoor game, Monday Night Football, coming off a tough loss in a game where they were fatally was the San Francisco 49er team. I got Purdy as a start, and Kirk Cousins, I have him as a start as well. We know he's a gunslinger, and we know he's a quarterback. I know in prime time doesn't play good, but with 6 teams on bye and Cousins still putting up points and still has some decent weapons, Jordan Addison, KJ Osborne, and TJ Hawkinson. Even with Justin Jefferson out, obviously his points will take a hit, but he's still a quarterback I would start this week. So that's quarterback starts it every matchup for week 7 of the fantasy football season.